broadcasting around the world. This is the Hard Asset Money Show. Your wealth, your money, your future. Serious talk about what's happening and how you can profit. Live in 3, 2, 1.
Today we have the privilege of Christian Briggs, one of the top precious metals and gold experts in the country, and the Honorable Congressman Mark Green with us. We also have Mandy Gunasekera, who will be joining us here in just a moment. Thanks for investing time with us today. This is an incredibly important intel briefing, a very important conversation, a very important session. You'll want to take notes. We are available at the conclusion of this and beyond this broadcast to answer questions. Christian, we're very honored to have you with us today. And the Congressman, I'm going to turn it over to you. And thank you for your leadership. We're looking forward to it. And thank you so much.
This podcast is brought to you by Hard Asset Management. We have the guaranteed lowest prices on all precious metals and rare coins. Call us at 844-426-4653. That's 844-426-4653.
So today's call, and I've asked Congressman Green, since he's fully aware of some of the variables and the things that are going on behind the curtain. Today's call is really going to be relevant to not just the topic of what a centralized currency or a centralized monetary platform is about, but more importantly, how they were able to build this thing, certainly within the context of usurping Congress's approval or authority on issuing any kind of new money. That's the key right now. Then we're going to also talk about what are smart contracts. Smart contracts, which are now aggressively being pushed by Office of Currency and Cash, which is kind of the governing body of banks. So the OCC has come out with banks, and now it's being pretty much proliferated all the way to the private sectors. We know ESG is a fundamental factor in, and this is key, in the ESG movement, which is obviously a communist Marxist method of governing companies and forcing them to do things that the government otherwise couldn't do. They're also being led to tell their managers and people within their organization, especially BlackRock, they're one of the worst, obviously, to start digitizing all of the contracts. Contracts are being anything that shows ownership. So a car title, a deed to a property, any measure of paper that shows absolute ownership. They're digitizing those and they're putting them into a decentralized ledger for now, under the pretense that once the central bank digital currency becomes the law of the land, the only monetary item that you can utilize for buying and selling anything, then decentralized systems will go to centralized. Once it's centralized, no different than the old term centralizing power, where a handful or a few control the masses. So this is all today going to show a great deal of how much of this has been built, why cryptocurrency was kind of the programming and the conditioning for people to use digital versus the checks and the cash that we had for decades or centuries, in some cases thousands of years, using cash and checks, obviously. And now we've kind of come full circle into this is our new way of paying, pretty much exclusive with the young people under 25, 24. Their aptitude for using the phone or digital payment system is in that 80 to 90% category. I mean, it's a lot. And one thing to make a note, this is what's so important. This is so important, is that this is being done at levels that is unprecedented. So I think what I'm going to do is start a little bit about kind of giving Congressman Green a little bit to be able to give you guys an overview of what him and I have been working on with other members of Congress, to be able to bring awareness to the whole, I consider it to be the whole conservative movement, to try to stop this. So I'm going to let Congressman Green kind of do some intro, and he'll talk a lot about what he knows, and then we'll go right into our presentation.
Well, thanks, Christian. It's great to meet everyone here, and an opportunity to educate folks on what the Fed has been doing behind the scenes to advance a central bank digital currency, which, as Christian has stated, puts all the levers in the hands of just a few bureaucrats to know exactly what we're spending our money on, and actually to influence that. And we'll talk about how that happens, I think, in the presentation. But you think about the social credit score in China, But when they know exactly what you're spending and exactly what you're selling in every transaction, it becomes very easy to impose your will on people. So the Fed now's been doing the work. They've got a central bank digital currency done. They've tested it, and it is essentially ready to go live. And they did this using sort of a backhanded way. They don't get funded obviously by Congress, but interest rates on the debt they've bought. So they funded their system. They've got it. You can actually go out and Google. They're hiring people right now to monitor and manage and run the system. So the Fed banks, you can find them posted on job listing sites for central bank digital currency and digital currency. So this thing's up and ready, but it hasn't been fully centralized yet. So that's essentially where we are. And of course, Christian is going to talk about what centralized currency is. We're going to talk about, I guess, what smart contracts are, which is really where the power is to control people. And I'll let Christian talk about that, or I can if he wants me to. But that's the biggest fear, is this smart contract part. And then I think ultimately, when they have that kind of control and they know when you purchase something, the concept of a title to that property can actually go away, because they know who has it, and they always know who has it when that money pays for it. So they can create a title system inside this and basically control your ownership of everything. So that's an introduction, Christian, and I'll let you start your program if you're ready.
The Hard Asset Money Show will be right back after a word from our sponsor. Let's take a look at how the rare coin market has skyrocketed in the past 2 to 3 years, specifically proof gold, and how their performance has done after Christian Briggs, CEO of Hard Asset Management, put an immediate buy recommendation in late 2019 on United States proof gold. Specifically $20 St. Gaudens gold pieces, $20, $10, and $5 Liberty proof gold, and $10 and $5 Indian head proof gold. A 1933 $20 St. Gaudens grade MS65 was valued at $6.5 million in May 2021. Today, it is valued at $22.5 million. An 1864 $20 Liberty head DCAM Proof 67 was valued at $1 million in October 2021. Today, it is valued at $2,750,000.
Any of you are familiar with what's happening, but not to the level and the depth. We're going to go right into it. And I want to make sure that everybody's aware how many companies that over the last, let's say, 7.5 years now, have been integrating all of their different parts to make this CBDC and really a centralized blockchain come to a reality. I mean, it's going to overwhelm some people on the call. So I just want to make sure that everybody's prepared, because it's the little minions that have been working so aggressively to bring this to fruition have done an incredible job. And we'll talk about how they paid for it. So let's go right into it. We all know what this is. We can agree on that. This is the system of which we have a great way of which now to buy and sell. So what we're seeing right here, right now, is the evolution or the episodic understanding that this thing started 8 years ago. In fact, there were some papers going back all the way to 2014, which were some of the early stages of the software architecture that would otherwise be, we call it basically the blueprints of what this ultimately has now become today, and what it's going to continue to grow and manifest itself and evolve into over the next 18 months. Milestones. This is real critical here, as I said earlier. What we have is, we now have a central bank digital currency that's already advanced into pretty much 98% of the global GDP. The 85 to 90% of the population will be utilizing it in some way, shape, or form. And when you see the word pilot programs, that's one step above a beta. So in other words, it's beta plus. It's in some type of executionable, what we go from production servers, which is how you build it, to deployment servers. So I had a software company. And what the main staple is, okay, this is so important, is that when you reach pilot programming or pilot development and then pilot deployment, what you're really doing is you're having a larger than say a beta test, substantially larger, but you're basically saying that we feel comfortable enough that this is within 99% of what it's going to be. So we now have 9 countries, and we have 21 countries as of, because this is probably 3 to 4 weeks old. Now 21 countries, instead of the 9 right here, have achieved a pilot program's advancement. Okay, a different, we call it in software, there's different action items and different things like that. And what that means is about 21 countries, basically, they've got their CBDC. And by the end of this year, it would probably be the law of the land, if not exclusively, certainly being pushed aggressively to supersede and to usurp any of the cash or check use. And what's so interesting about this is it's all tied into the Bank of International Settlements. If you go online, you'll see where BIS incorporates the digital yuan. And I believe now about 25 to 30 banks have already unified around the digital yuan. So not only is the BRICS, which we'll talk about that later, but the BRICS membership, which really is hurting the dollar aggressively, has unified themselves with the understanding that the dollar is their enemy. It's time to get rid of the dollar. So their currency, which is forecast in this October when it comes out to be digital, it'll pretty much be backed by gold. So know this, that up to 41 countries will be part of the BRICS. That is one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve is anxious to get the CBDC out, because the dollar's demise, or the dollar's less use, is imminent. And we've seen that here in recent months. There's been a lot of articles. Bank of America, Morgan Stanley have put out recent articles that basically have put the dollar in kind of a doomsday box, if you will, that it's going to be very challenging for the dollar to ever be restored to a level, whether it's reserve currency use by countries or reserve currency use by stature. It's pretty much a foretold conclusion that it's done. Now, how did the government do all this? How did the federal government, during the last few years of Obama, the Trump administration, and the current administration, come up with all of the incentives they needed to get this done? Well, the incentive was, like anything, contain, control, surveil. And we've said that before. Amazon is a partner in the development of the cloud systems that are going to be utilized in order to be able to achieve this, what I call monumental new world order, the Great Reset, and the one global currency. So there are white papers on Amazon through the AWS, which is obviously Amazon Web Services, that show part 1, 2, and 3, which is a collaboration of think tanks, high level, MIT, and other, I call them institutions, not just federal government, but private. They got together and they created, over a 2-year period, the architectures, the standards, really the regulations. This is what's so interesting. If you look right here, as AWS is a service provider, okay, this is what they're doing, and they're doing it based on this program right here, the Federal Risk Authorization Management Program and all this. This is how the Fed said, look, we need it to be laid out like this. It needs to have this functionality and this outcome. Functionality is obviously the logic that's built within the system, the functionality and all of that, and then the outcome is what the net results are. And net results is it builds databases on all of the transactions. And then, like Powell said recently, you can't balance efficiency and safety with privacy anymore. That was a quote. Remember, you can't balance safety and efficiency with keeping and maintaining privacy in a CBDC. It goes against the whole understanding of what it is. So Amazon has basically now became the partner of the data collection systems. Here's some stuff here that just continues to show the progress. You know, when people ask about, is this thing real? It's already out. And like Congressman Green knows, all they did was rename it. Instead of calling it a CBDC, which they did in those early years, and even till about 2 years ago, a year ago, now they've reformulated it as a digital asset that's tokenized uniquely for the removal of cash and transactions, and to do digital transactions where you have a serialized token that's unique. So there'll be millions of them or billions, depends on the size of the transaction. That is a CBDC by pure definition and use case. Okay, now here's some of the countries. Anybody can go to and look this stuff up. You go to cbdctracker.org. It's incredible how many people are starting to understand not just the complexity of how it was built, which took trillions of dollars, but the simplicity of how they're deploying it right in front of us. All right. So we have white papers that are available after this call. We have a link, a secure box. If you want to see the white papers, some do, some won't. because it's disturbing. You'll see that some of these white papers go from 20 pages to as many as 60 pages, and they're articulately written in such a way that it is absolutely, we have some now that coming into 24 that shows not only the rules and regulations that are being unified, that are being accepted across all central banks, but some of the rollout timelines are starting to become relevant as far as now, because they're starting to be shown and talked to. Now, let's talk about this for a second. This is so important. There's three things that create an asset. One is a physical, tangible asset that we all know. And that can be something that's to be seen and touched and all that. The other one is a piece of paper asset, which by definition creates a asset on a piece of paper that's understood to be an ownership, okay? Those are the two physical things I consider to be relevant, in other words, and with the smart contracts. Now, if you take a piece of paper that says John Smith owns this house at 123 Maple Lane, that piece of paper is a deed, whether that deed has clear of liens or has a lien on it from a bank or a lender from a mortgage or some kind of a debt against it. Either way, a piece of paper exists. It exists in a number of different places. One, if there's a lender that has a lien on it, if it's paid for, it's going to be probably a copy in your records personally, if you're the owner. And two, there's always a copy of that at a title company and or a county or state, something that shows how to charge for sales or for retail or real estate tax. It's very simple. Now what they're doing is the CBDCs with smart contracts are integrating those type of understandings of assets, not just in a manner of which for safety and efficiency. What they're talking about now is actually taking paper that has the specific and explicit understanding of asset ownership and turning that into a digital contract. And a digital contract, once it's in the blockchain, you cannot remove it. In other words, that ownership or the last person that owns it, as just like a central bank digital currency transaction, is now listed in what they call ledger technology. And that ledger, if it's permission based and it's decentralized, you have the free will through an encrypted key to be able to turn that key and say, okay, John Smith is selling this house for X to Bob over here, and that transfer is noted in the blockchain. So it's a complete linear understanding of ownership that's absolute. I mean, it's absolute. However, that key is given to you through a digital ledger, and this goes back to CBDCs, to where you can use them because they're in a decentralized blockchain ledger. Okay. Now, a CBDC cannot work in its essence and defined of what it really is in a decentralized blockchain, so it has to go centralized. You centralize the power, you centralize the control. Now you own what? The digital key. So now what they're doing with paper that has a clear ownership title is that they're digitalizing that paper. And if you want to know how it works, go put in there. Larry Fink of BlackRock talks about tokenization of equities and bonds and other financial accounts and instruments, because once it gets into the blockchain as a decentralized system, all you got to do is flip a switch and it collapses from a decentral to a centralized. So just know that this is starting to happen. And if you notice here, it's getting aggressive. What they're doing is putting all the assets, and many of you all have the CTA, the Corporate Transparency Act, which now mandates that any and all entities that have any beneficial, or indirect and direct beneficial ownership over 25%, you have to disclose that. Asset disclosure is fundamentally going to be the progress of what the CTA is going to do. So they'll know, based on your uploading to the Financial Crimes Division network of the IRS, who owns what in that entities. It's SC, LLC, and trust entities, those. Who owns what, how much they own, beneficial, non-beneficial, or indirect beneficial, and assets. Why? Because then they can smart contracting all of those assets. Okay, do it, do the math, follow the ball. You'll see where the dots connect. Okay, here are some companies that are involved. These companies now are moving aggressively for decentralized ledger to try to do what Google did 15, 20 years ago, and that was they digitalized every single book in the Library of Congress. Well, why would they do that? Well, Google now had at their fingertips the information for any kind of query or any kind of a search they would have the Library of Congress at their fingertips. Think of it like this. The federal government's Google. They digitize every single piece of paper. These companies are helping them be able to take it from a paper world. Then it went to old print or film back in the day, 50 years ago. You had microfiche. Now we're talking about taking the same paper and digitizing in the blockchain, forever utilizing the blockchain's complete. It's like a vault. It's impregnable. Once it's in there, it's in there. And so if they can get all paper assets, all the things of which that show ownership into a smart contract, then what happens is whack. You go from decentral to central, and all of a sudden, guess what? You own nothing and you'll be miserable. Oh, I think that's part of the way they say it. Now, let's talk about who are the companies helping to do this for all the governments around the world, but primarily here domestically. These companies, including BlackRock, which Larry Fink was just recently doing an interview, and I believe it was on Bloomberg, and I've sent it to many of you, the interview, it was horrifically Marxist. Basically, at the end of the day now, what they've done is they've taken all of these blockchains, okay, and they're integrating them into one centralized system. And you can clearly see right here, digital bonds. This right here, this is they're actually promoting this as a new method of which to create a safety, a measure of your asset vault. In other words, your security. What's really being done, it's step one of just 2 steps. Get all the paper digitized, get it in centralization, decentralize it by default, because when the CBDC becomes the law of the land, that will be mandated as the only way of which you buy and sell. Well, guess what? CBDC can't work on a decentralized system because that goes against the whole understanding of what it is. Then government can't control it. Anonymity and autonomous type transactions become the way it works. Well, they're not going to do that. I mean, that would go against the whole reason why you build this thing. It's like building a Formula One car, but forgetting to put the steering wheel on it. It's like, oh, you'll go somewhere. It just won't be where you want to go, and there's no control over the car. It's going to go willy-nilly this without a steering wheel, but it has an engine. So the steering wheel is the final push of the centralization. Now you can steer. You're mandating this, and I'm going to let Congressman Green, he knows this stuff because he's obviously very intimately studied all this with us, and know that this system that they're building, these white papers, this is no joke. These things clearly outline, and I'm going to show a couple of things here. I'm going to turn over to Congressman Green in a second, but they clearly show the understanding everything that they built. Here's Project Jasper. This was the skunk works of Canada to be able to say, okay, we got to get this thing going. And then they started utilizing platforms and really beyond proof of concepts, but digital DLTs, which is digital ledger technology. They were starting to utilize these private companies' systems to test their own CBDC on us. And then they would say, okay, well, let's centralize it in maybe a development type of environment. Okay, that means a small. And then next thing you know, here we go. And all of a sudden, here comes what? Boom. You now have Bank of International Settlements, BIS, which is owned, controlled, and maintained by 60 central governments. In other words, other central banks of governments. It's the bank of banks. If you've ever wanted to know who is the big cheese, they're the big cheese. These guys are run out of Switzerland. They're made very clear that the system that BIS uses for the SWIFT has now switched to be able to adhere to the demands and the needs of the BRICS membership. And they are now utilizing through all of their applications the new digital yuan, which, by the way, is growing by the day, and it is growing fast. This one right here, you can see this. We chronologically put this in order of development meaning the understanding of what they were building, how they were building it, the systems of which they were building in order to be able to integrate on a universal basis, not just individual networks that don't communicate and talk, but API systems that were basically APIs to an extent, but they were far, far more sophisticated. It was almost like a perfectly put together puzzle where the APIs were really just iron locks into a more unified, centralized blockchain. Now here's the AWS stuff, okay? If there is no central bank digital currency being created, why do you need this? Why is Amazon being paid billions and billions and billions of dollars to be able to build something that you're not building, that you're never going to do, that you never did do. And then all of a sudden you admit, well, maybe we did do it, but we didn't do it for the retail application for only Congress. Well, maybe we can usurp Congress. All this stuff's been admitted. I mean, there's no secret to this. The secret really is how fast they did it, and the sauce is going to be shown even further here soon. This one right here is Citibank. Now, they launched theirs in September of last year under the header of digital assets that are tokenized. Okay, well, that's what Larry Fink says. If we tokenize everything, we digitize all paper, all equity accounts globally, all bonds, all real estate deeds, all car titles. Basically, what you get is you get a centralized control that then means that your assets are not your assets anymore, but you're more of, well, you're squatters, I guess, or you're going to be renters. They just raise the taxes. So this thing is out. They started already transacting.
The Hard Asset Money Show will be right back after a word from our sponsor. Let's take a look at how the rare coin market has skyrocketed in the past 2 to 3 years, specifically Proof Gold, and how their performance has done after Christian Briggs, CEO of Hard Asset Management, put an immediate buy recommendation in late 2019 on United States Proof Gold. Specifically $20 St. Gaudens gold pieces, $20, $10, and $5 Liberty Proof Gold, and $10 and $5 Indian Head Proof Gold. An 1860 $10 Liberty Head DCAM Proof 63 Plus was valued at $110,000 in May 2021. Today it is valued at $235,000. An 1866 $5 Liberty Head DCAM Proof 66 was valued at $120,000 in May 2021. Today it is valued at $325,000.
I'm gonna kind of turn this a little bit over to Congressman Green and let him take a little bit. I'm going to stop sharing right here for a second. And if I could, Dave, I'm going to let Mark kind of talk a little bit because he is, and Mandy's joined us now. She was on Fox News a second ago, but she's joined us now to be able to talk through this.
So Christian's sort of the scientist here. So I'm gonna kind of put this into country boy from Mississippi language. The digital transaction gets recorded when it goes through a central system. So every single thing you buy is now monitored by the government. They'll have a record of it. They can write code, distinct code into it called the smart contract, so that if you go to buy diesel with your digital currency, they can actually put if-then statements in there. If you've bought X amount of diesel so far, then you don't get to buy any more diesel this month. And what's interesting is the World Economic Forum actually said just that. The head of the World Economic Forum said that with the great thing about central bank digital currency, if you're buying too much diesel or too much ammo, we can turn it off. So they're saying the really scary part out loud. And that's built into the code by contract. And so if you, let's say you're running the central bank and you're a crazy climate person and you think that Tennessee or another state should only have so much diesel. Maybe your neighbor uses a lot that month and the state has an allocation. So there's a lot of control here that can happen if they do it this way. And the other thing that Christian was talking about, the fact that the title is no longer really necessary because the encryption key is built into the transaction. They will have the ability to retain your title if they want and control what you own and ultimately even take it from us. And there's a great book out there, You Will Own Nothing and Be Happy, that Christian made a joke about earlier, and I'd encourage folks to read that. The Fed, this is built, the Fed chair presenting to Congress contradicted himself between two different testimonies. One, he said it requires Congress, and then the next time he basically said it only requires Congress for retail transactions, meaning, when a customer makes a purchase, but business to business transactions, what they call wholesale, he thinks that the Fed can implement a central bank digital currency for those transactions without congressional approval. He said that, he clarified that with Bill Hagerty. I think it was Bill Hagerty in the Senate who asked the question. So the Fed, at least the Fed chair, thinks they can execute a central bank digital currency around Congress, at least to the level of B2B transactions. That's very concerning. Also, something that we need to talk about, and I'm going to have to blast Christian, so I'm going to share a little bit about Fed now. And then from my perspective as a constitutional conservative and a Christian, and who I am and my value system, why this is so concerning to me and why I jumped on this podcast with you today. FedNow is operating it. It started in, I think, last July, and it's doing the clearinghouse work for all the banks now. But they're the central bank, right? Why would they need every customer's information out there? And banks that do use the FedNow system, if you go to the FedNow website, it looks like a bank. I don't know if it's their intention. I haven't found where it's been stated, but essentially they can put the banks out of business now that they have their customer data. They can loan to themselves a lot cheaper than they can loan to another bank. So we have to be very careful about FedNow. Is that a transition to this centralized control? A lot of us are scratching our heads and saying, yeah, look, the ultimate ramifications of all this is freedom. Freedom is at risk. And so we're going to do everything we can. Those of us who are in Congress, there are several bills. Tom Emmer has a really good bill. He's, a Republican in the House, to block central bank digital currency. I think Senator Haggerty and other Senator Loomis, these are folks that are really pushing back on this centralized control of our money system. Christian's going to share a bunch of white papers and a lot more details. I've got to bail and get to another meeting, but this is really important, and I'm very grateful for the people who've joined this call to learn about what central bank digital currency is and the threat it is to freedom. So thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, Congressman Green, thank you for joining us. Just one 30-second question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Chat. Revelations 13 is really clear that the day is coming when you will not be able to buy or sell. So what that tells me is, in your illustration, when you go to the gas tank, you can't buy gas because of your political or religious views, right? Isn't that where this could potentially go? Right?
Certainly, it could. Yeah, absolutely. We know that some of our agencies recently did I think it was the DOJ recently did a search to identify individuals who were Googling things like church service times. So we found out about this. So we reported in the open source news that they did this. So it's very possible that, political views, religious views could be targeted, and they can turn your money off if they think you're, the ESG is just the start of it. But that's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for all you're doing. We will serve and support and do everything we can to help you in this fight. And we're going to mobilize a whole national network to serve and support you. So thank you.
That would be awesome. Thank you, guys.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. There's a couple of parts here. So one of the things that people need to understand is that this is already built. The question now comes to, like Dave, you make a good point about biblically. Warren Davidson and recently has said this is some biblical stuff that's happening, because what they've done is unified so many of the countries around the world to be able to understand and adopt one universal monetary system. That's the key right there. How did they do that? Well, they did that no different than how they did COVID. How did you shut the world down? You had some kind of a unified front, a message of understanding that would obviously come so quickly for people to get. And once they got it, they became almost, the old saying is, communism is where you believe the unbelievable, so that way the believable becomes whatever they tell you. And that's what COVID did, was they trained the brain of billions of people that says, when the government says this is the best thing for you, you're safer, and this is how we're gonna do things in such a way that creates a security that goes far beyond your understanding, but you got to give up some of your liberties and freedom. They're doing that. I'm going to introduce Manny Gunasegura because there's a good question from Harold that we're going to address here in a second, but she's going to talk a little bit about some of the things of which we've made some incredible progress on, just exactly how bad this thing is. And then I want to kind of put these bullet points up. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, Dave. Just give me 1 second here. By the way, this is a great alternative to Zoom. I will agree that this is really good. And for anybody that's on this call, I've used this now a couple of times, and not here to promote it, but it actually is very good. All right, so let me go ahead and kind of go back to this thing here. Mandy, if you got some notes there, if you want to go ahead and take it. This is Mandy.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone, and apologies for being late. So we've obviously been paying close attention to the evolution of this whole issue. And as Christian lays out, this started many, many years ago, but it really is experiencing a major uptick. And recently we came across this, a couple of reports, the digital dollar report from the Atlantic Council, again, not our friends, but they're saying the quiet part out loud. And really to capture this, think of it in terms that the Congressman Green just said, this is about freedom, but these actions, these global actions, what they're also doing is incrementally chipping away at one of the most important documents with regards to our freedom, and that's our Constitution. And so you have these bureaucracy on steroids, these global institutions, whether it's the World Economic Forum, the Atlantic Council, the Bank of International Settlements, they have been working together and pressuring and bringing in a variety of companies, Visa, for example, which Christian has brought up right here, but they are using corporate America and this quote unquote global nonprofit / bureaucracy to do the thing of what this administration wants, which is to shore up diminished individual freedoms and institute a surveillance state to ensure that the American people are actually controllable. And the easiest way to do that from their perspective is expanding what they've done from the climate space and industrial activity and ESG and transplanting that into the financial sector, which we're really seeing play out with the advance and growth and adoption of central bank digital currencies. And just to put that in perspective, there are over 130 countries. This is from that report that we were reading through yesterday with regards to central bank digital currencies. To date, there are 130 countries representing 98% of the global economy are researching and in many cases actually deploying central bank digital currencies. 18%, two things. There's a distinguishing application between retail and wholesale or commercial. Retail is where CBDCs really start putting their surveillance fingers into the everyday transactions of the general public. And this is the retail CBDC. 18% of central banks across the globe plan to issue a retail CBDC over the next few months to years. This is really a 2-year outlook. 15% plan to issue a commercial or wholesale CBDC in that same time. And if you ever wonder, maybe there is an efficiency argument. Maybe it is a good idea. All of this is premised on this concept of global financial inclusion. And if you need a red flag word, that is your red flag word, because it's not about inclusion and ease of financial transactions, regardless of who you are, where you're from, or what you believe from a political, ideological perspective. It is all this transition towards a controlled electorate and diminishing skeptics, or those who question whatever the statement of the day is, be it climate change, be it COVID, or be it CBDCs. So Christian, I'll pitch it back to you, sure, and you can dig in a little bit more, but we'll take more questions.
Yeah, so let me just kind of get you up to speed here. If you kind of look at these documents right here, and you look at who's putting these documents out, the Federal Reserve. So you start to think about, okay, why would they even create documents like this if the system itself wasn't even being considered? And Powell gave recent testimony that they weren't even considering a CBDC in a closed-door meeting. These documents were at the fingertips of a member of Congress that clearly knew he was lying, or he was kept in the dark, which is hard to believe. So when you look at all of this, and this is going back, now a couple of years. It's not like this was just 6 months ago. And you can do a lot of stuff. And let me tell you how software works very quickly. Software, as far as capacity, doubles every 18 months. In other words, all systems have to increase capacity just within 18 months, double. So it doubles every 18 months. So you have software that actually increases the usage and the requirements of hardware and storage, as well as systems that can create even a faster way of which to process that information, especially queries, which is really what everything's all about, and commands, which is the basic logic of a system that does from a utility. So what happens is you have capacity that has to double every 18 months, which means software advances so quickly. In other words, from January of 22 to today, this system that they are talking about having to integrate into a centralized blockchain had to have had double in capacity, which means you cannot do something every 6 or 12 months in a slow collaboration method or environment. That's not true. You have to do it on a daily basis, because software does this, hardware does this. Hardware is the capacity to hold the software. All software is AI. artificial intelligence, your phone is in AI. So this is being fast tracked. In fact, they even have, you'll see right here, these people are already methodically doing all this. If there's no central bank digital currency, then why do you call it a central bank digital currency over here at MasterCard? Do you think MasterCard came up with this? No. The only way they could have done this is have approval from the federal government as well as other central banks around the world. So it's a collaboration of really a handful of people who control 80, 90% of the governmental authority to be able to collaborate on this level. And it took trillions of dollars to build a completely new global monetary system. Make no mistake about it. This is basically the Federal Reserve's Skunk Works project based out of Boston on how they were going to develop this. And if you look at all of this, centralized versus decentralized, they're very clever in how they write this stuff. So there's no question this exists. There's no question they deployed it in a controlled environment, and there's no question they have served Congress's authority. The question comes right down to how fast can this become the law of the land? Right now, as of yesterday, there was a recent article of an article to an article to an article. So you kind of got to go down all these different links. And they put it out there because they don't think anybody's looking. And you know what? They're right. They are right. Nobody is looking because nobody wants to believe that this authoritative tyranny or control could be instituted in a country that's based on the freedom of choice, the freedom of pursuit of whatever it is. And to now we're going to be limited to a small amount of freedom that's going to be controlled in a box. Well, guess what? Here's your box. If you ever want to know what the box looks like, there's your box right here. This right here, for anybody that's in software, this is very easy to understand. This is the design side. Now you've got design, and now you have executable protocols, which are built within the logic. This stuff is done. And here, right here, was the executive order that was signed in order to basically fast track the deployment of this. And why would they do that? Why would they want to worry about the 4 years that they had in Biden's current first term? Well, because there may not be a second term. And they're trying like hell to make sure there's no second term of Trump, that the Biden or the Obama administration, which has actually been said many times even by their side, they don't want to have the risk of Trump coming in and trying to stop this. Now, unfortunately, a few months ago, and many of you were, I think, present or knew of the conversation where Trump did say the CBDC is not something he can ever stop, but he could slow it down. And that's kind of what it's all about. This, again, goes back to all of the various places in which both the BRICS are taking on us head to head. Understand that this is the why gold's been going up. We're yesterday, and this is a fact, members of Congress, a few of them that I've talked to, have confirmed that the Federal Reserve has been buying massive amounts of gold. So we know that as China backed the digital yuan with gold, and these other countries are buying some of the absolute largest amounts of gold, this is how they're going to backstop a deficiency in the currency or the credibility of coming out with something that really doesn't exist. It don't exist in a framework of computers provided the power's turned on, and hope to God it's not solar or wind that powers that platform. Otherwise, we'll never be able to transact, and we'll go back to gold, which may be the de facto fundamental basis of monetary or money anyway. But with that said, you can see right here as we continue to evolve, now we're in March of 23, this report, Mandy's going to talk a little bit about this. This report was specific that the president had an economic advisor said, look, we need to get this thing going because they're manifesting this understanding in their heads that if Trump comes in, he could stop it. Can't stop it, but we can slow it down. They're realizing that because why they're fast tracking it. Mandy?
Well, yeah, and I think the big takeaway here is the president and his team know that they are limited by certain laws on the books. Now, they do as good a job as possible to try and ignore those laws and do what they're going to do anyway. But in the interim, to try and prevent a Trump administration from coming in and just wholesale getting rid of central bank digital currencies, they're fast tracking the pressure on corporations in general and banks, and basically telling them, look, if you don't get on board with the CBDC, I'm paraphrasing here, but I know how these conversations go because I saw it happen with a lot of the big businesses when I was chief of staff at USCPA. But nonetheless, the way the conversation goes is if you don't get on board with the central bank digital currency, then you're going to be out of the industry in the next year and a half. And so a lot of these large companies, well, the saying is you would rather be at the table than on the menu. And that's very much the mentality here. And so this administration has been, if you notice, a lot of these reports, and Christian has pulled out some of these quotes, they try to caveat everything. This is likely what it could look like. This document highlights something that could theoretically be this or theoretically be that. The federal government is saying that, and it's encapsulated in a report that represents tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars at work by virtue of the federal employees that spent their time, money, and resources creating and developing it. It's already done. They are just saying that to try and save face with laws that would otherwise limit them. They're putting this out there, sending that message to corporations, either get on board or you're out of business. And they've been very effective, certainly on the financial sector with a lot of your key financial transactors and even the platforms. We were reading about Swift yesterday, which we can get into in a little bit. But, again, I like to always bring this back to in the climate world. They've been very effective in trying to force their quote unquote government limited climate action into the corporate America by virtue of environmental, social, and governance standards, and they're being very effective in shuttering utilities and the use of fossil fuel. They're different, but very parallel in the sense of how this administration tries to force something into the marketplace or onto the people that they would they either are protected from by virtue of existing laws or would not accept by virtue of traditional choice in the way that we've all grown up having choice.
The Hard Asset Money Show will be right back after a word from our sponsor. Let's take a look at how the rare coin market has skyrocketed in the past 2 to 3 years, specifically proof gold, and how their performance has done after Christian Briggs, CEO of Hard Asset Management, put an immediate buy recommendation in late 2019 on United States proof gold, specifically $20 St. Gaudens gold pieces, $20, $10, and $5 Liberty proof gold, and $10 and $5 Indian head proof gold. A 1907 $10 Indian head grade MS66 Plus was valued at $450,000 in May 2021. Today, it is valued at $1 million. A 1909 $5 Indian head proof 67 Plus was valued at $145,000 in September 2021. Today, it is valued at $200,000.
Yeah, I want to make sure, this is an important little document right here. They're using climate change as a basis to justify centralized control of all types, whether it's transportation, the healthcare system, or the monetary system, money. This is an interesting quote right here. Blockchains provide the ability through smart contracts to pull revenue. That's forcing revenue from secondary market transactions back to project developers in a way that just doesn't happen in a typical carbon market. In other words, what they're saying is, if they get everything contract ownership of everything into a digital ledger, centralize it, which they will do. Make no mistake, they're already doing it, thus creating a system in which they can force you to pay for your carbon footprint. That's how you basically have what the world says. You won't really own it. You don't own your house. If you don't pay your real estate taxes, I can guarantee within some measure of time, whether it's a year or 10 years, that county or whatever it is that does the real estate tax, they will come and sell your house. You don't, even agricultural exempt still has some form of money that's paid each year. And that title, that deed, whatever is quantifies the ownership of something on that paper, clearly is with some group, whether it's a government, semi-government, by Fed, state, or a local level. It's there, period, it's there. That's like a cartel is at the DMV. A deed is at the title company, even if you own both of them outright. And they're using this crap blockchain climate change action, like this document says, and of course WEF is of course evil as it gets, as a method to the madness of how they're going to own. See, focus on data ownership. Yeah, well, you know what that means. And then it continues. So now these are different other white papers that go directly into the understanding of how the technology is going to work, how they're going to force you to use a digital currency, how they're going to force smart contracts to be centralized, how then they're going to charge you to own your own assets that you paid for. And then this is what Congressman Green was saying. Him and I met last year, some time ago, with one of the, I can't think of his name top of my head, but it was a gentleman from the American Bankers Association sitting there in DC. This guy said that the Fed now is a direct competitor to all commercial banks, but even more so the small and medium, because they don't have their own clearing facilities, so they use larger banks like the Morgans or the Bank of Americas and so forth. So now here's currently what's wrong with this. It's anonymity to a lot of degree. Cash, checks. What's this? Well, it's the Fed now telling these banks, you see how it goes back and forth? We are going to give you a platform of use. It's much cheaper than what you're paying for, because you're paying all these big bad banks. You don't want to pay them. They're bad. The Jamie Dimons and so forth. So what? Well, let's go over here. Now you send all of your customers onto the Fed Now platform. Bingo. Now you have a centralized bank of the United States. And this is what it is. And I have met with a number of senators and other House members. This is not conjecture. This is truth. This is the absolute. The Fed Now is basically, if you're in a business, it's your number one competitor taking your clients onto his platform, whatever that may be, or putting them in his business profile and saying, sure, I'll work your clients and I'll pay you a commission. Eventually he'll say, I got all your clients, toodles. That's what this is all about. That's why it's a problem. It's a problem if you don't see it. It's a manifesting of what is here and what's forthcoming conclusively. And so if you start to look at where they're building all this, it's been no secret that Ripple has been the backbone to the CBDC globally. And if you look here in their documents, they don't just talk about the concept. They show you the method of the madness from an architectural standpoint of software deliverables all the way into an easy to understand white paper that says this is the future of fiat. It's CBDCs. Percentages of usage are skyrocketed. So as we kind of enter into the second quarter of 24, by the end of this year, we see about 25 countries far beyond a pilot, but a deployed CBDC. We see about 50 countries joining BRICS by the end of next year, if not sooner, controlling about 80% of the world's population. We see all CBDCs are being backed by gold. There's no question that they'll unify through BIS, which obviously is right here, and it continues. It gets faster and more aggressive, and the time scales and the use and the cases of what they're doing. So what's happening is now what they're really is important part is cross-border integration. That, in other words, trying to take all the local currencies, unify them on one centralized platform, and to be able to do cross-border currency transaction settlements instantly, that they do now, but in a way more efficient manner, but it goes into the centralized system. Once they get all that done in the next 18 months, and they will, then they'll drop the local currencies and we'll have one unified non-BRICS currency, which means there'll be the BRICS and there'll be us. Us, well, I don't know who the hell that is anymore. There'll be them and us. But bottom line is there'll be no paper. And so now a lot of the countries which are buying all the gold, and that's why gold's going up, is a backstop to the digital currencies. And if you've ever wondered how fast this is happening, they're building handbooks on how the CBDC will affect economic growth. And it is horrific. Stock market value declines, impacting, it's not good. This is the material effect of what they're doing to create the Great Reset on wealth inequality, destroy the wealth, destroy the asset values, destroy all of the various measures of how we value something. Lower bank profit. This is a document right here, International Monetary Fund. It's no joke. They put this thing out not to tell the world that, oh, this is the ramification and consequence of what we're doing, so we better not do it. No, we're going to do it anyway. This is what's going to happen, period. And that's the reason why you got a lot of these big PE hedge funds and other large-scale wealth managers and companies that manage trillions of dollars of wealth dumping stocks or taking a much more conservative approach, knowing that gold's going to go higher. Equities and bonds now are becoming centralized through digital ledgers, and this is absolutely what's happening. So this is where all of it started. And then the privacy fears came up. You know, of course, Bank of International Settlements pushes back and says, "What are you talking about? Of course, there's going to be some privacy taken, and trying to really say is, don't worry about the privacy." I mean, this guy was stuttering when he was trying to explain that the privacy will be an issue with consumers and users. And he was like, what privacy issue is there? There won't be any privacy. It's gone. So that's always good. And then again, going back, November 23, I'm going to go kind of fast. I know our limitations on time, but here's December. This is just a few months ago. There's no joke here. These people, both from the IMF, ECB, the Federal Reserve here, they have got all of this incorporated in such a way. And when the announcement finally comes out, which Maxine Waters kind of spilled the beans a few weeks ago on the Financial Services Committee of the House, where she said she wants to introduce the first new gold and silver bimetallic bill to make silver and gold standard come back. Well, she had said last year when Warren Davidson talked to her about CBDC, and she's like, we can't stop it. This is when the House bill came out in September of last year. And she was like, well, no, we need that thing, and we need this, we need that. And then it was talked about backing it with some gold. She said that'll never happen. Well, 2 weeks ago, she introduced the first concept and slash bill, if you will. It's not really a bill that hit the floor house yet, but the House floor. But it is definitely, they're moving in that direction to be able to back it to create the backstopping value weight proposition. And look at this. Here's December 23. Again, it goes back to the same thing. It's not only out there, it's being utilized, it's being used. And so at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it back over to Dave. I'll go ahead and you can see here. Oh, by the way, 20% of all oil transactions globally were done in a non-dollar currency. That's staggering, just so you know. And by the way, it wasn't long ago that 71% of the dollar was used as reserve currency for governments. Now we're down to about 46 or 47%. So the time of the dollar being the universal standard for value is now gone. The question is how fast will that standard continue to be demised through the BRICS going up and our debt? And I can go into more things like that. But this gives you guys some idea, and everybody on here, how fast this is going. And everything that's available, or I'm showing you here, is available. We're happy to send it to you, including the white papers, which are thousands of papers. I mean, literally, it's 1,000. Because
thousands of pages.
It really thousands of pages. Yeah, it's crazy. But we've read them all. And there's some stuff in that is so disheartening because of the intent of what they're trying to create now that they have created it. It really is the greatest grab of power that ultimately cannot be broken because it's all digitized systems. You can't physically pick it up and take it like you could gold or a physical object. So with that said, Dave, I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over and stop sharing. If anybody has any questions or you want to talk more details about certain things, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, no, Christian, this is great. And what you have laid out is very, very powerful, very inspiring. I think I want to make sure that we alert everybody because I know people have probably got to get off to other responsibilities here at the top of the hour. But a week from tomorrow, we are going to have another session with Christian, with Mandy. I'm not sure if Congressman Green will be able to join us or not, but Christian's going to lay out timelines. He's going to lay out more specifics because this is a dynamic conversation. It's certainly not static. And Christian, what you need to know is that there are a lot of people in this conversation right now that want to amplify you, that have access to media, that have access to big networks. We want to make you famous, if you will. And so what we want to do is we want to really get this message out to the masses. It needs to get out to the masses as soon as we possibly can. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on George Pond, who's raised his hand. I'm going to put him up on stage. George is an amazing catalytic leader in the Texas region, and a good friend. But George is in this fight and has been for a very long time.
Hey, George.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay. Christian, I thought that was an incredible presentation. I've been working behind the scenes with a group of Texans who are putting together a gold and silver backed digital currency. Texas has the only depository in the country among the states. And we got it through the House, but not through the Senate. But the concept is people can take their gold and silver and deposit it in the depository. And with a debit card, they can start doing transaction. Kevin Friedman has written a book about this. I hope he's online. And it's called Pirate Money. And they've got 25 other states that are very interested at various points where they want to introduce laws that will create legal tender backed by gold and silver It's a constitutional guarantee. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like it. I think some of the states are going to adopt more of that. The only underlying issue, though, because the concept is it holds water. There's no question it holds water. The question really comes right down to is how strong will the hand of the federal government be pushing against that concept? Well, certainly the idea of some of the states doing it, and I think some will be successful in deploying that or getting some kind of use case out of it. But the federal government then is going to force, like they do every time, to be able to mandate a one currency or one platform fits all. That would limit the state's ability to do cross-border payments. So you might be able to use what you're talking about within state, which I think is going to happen to some level. I mean, not exclusively, but certainly to some level. However, the federal government controls the cross-border, cross-state line ability to transact. So if you want to send a wire, if it goes anywhere within the continental U.S., it goes to the Federal Reserve, and once the Federal Reserve sees it, then if it needs to go overseas, it's sent over through BIS. So they have the bully power, or the power of the
Bully pulpit.
Yeah, the bully pulpit. Yeah, say that 10 times fast. They have that ability, and they've used it for decades. Not just the Federal Reserve, but the federal government, whether it's EPA, FDA, or whether it's Department of Education withholding money from states. I mean, they use this stuff, and they use it as a projectile missile. They'll shoot you down every single time that you come up with an idea that usurps their ability, not just of authority, but of control. See, it's all about control. The authority grants you the ability to issue regulations and or bypass Congress to make those regulations seem like they're law, but thus usurping Congress's overall approval of whatever that is. They've done it. Supreme Court has said it so many times. So I would say this, George, the concept of what you're talking to, it holds water. The question is how many people will they automatically force, and people being states and the people within them, force them to use the Federal Reserve System exclusively, and we don't know that yet. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, no, it's outstanding. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to bring this to a wrap for today. Mark your calendars for Thursday, April 4th, Thursday, April 4th at 11 a.m. California time. So do the time of whatever zone you happen to be in. Mark your calendar. Contact me if you want to have a personal introduction to Christian, and if you don't happen to know him, I'd be delighted to introduce you to him. He is a catalytic leader. They are doing yeoman's work for such a time as this. Thanks for joining with us today. We appreciate each of you investing time on this missional important topic. So we bid you well until next time. Thanks so much on the Voice of Reason.